Hello everyone. So I am recording your week 10 lecture. As I said that this lecture is going to be focused on tutorials. Now, how do you write the discussion section? For that, I'll be sharing with you one Word document. Just bear with me. Word document. I'm so tired. Okay, guys. So basically in this Word document, I want to explain to you how you should be, what are the key points you should be considering when you write your discussion section. Okay. So guys, these track changes which I have over here, these boxes, please read them carefully when you're writing your discussion section. Okay, that is very important. So now, the first thing which I have written over here, for instance, is that the very first paragraph of your discussion section, and this is what was there in my epidemiology slides, which I had shared with you informally. The first paragraph of your discussion section, it always summarizes your main findings. What are the main findings for the nutrition education session which you are covering? Your main findings are the bivariate analysis which you are doing in SPSS using paired sample t-test. That is your main findings. Okay, so the findings which you have obtained out of your pre-post intervention, that is called as your main findings. Okay, so that is what you'll be summarizing over here as part of your first paragraph of your discussion section. Okay, so now, for example, your main findings could be that our key, see over here, our findings highlighted that there was a change in, say, improvement in knowledge about the importance of fruit and vegetable consumption among children before and after the intervention, and regarding their awareness regarding what was that, fruit and Australian guides to healthy eating. Okay, so basically, guys, you have to very briefly summarize what is the key thing which you found out of the SPSS analysis which you have done. Okay. Now, these are the key principles of a discussion section which I have summarized for you over here. Remember, in a discussion section, you do not write your discussion section with n values and percentages. You do not say 80% of our participants. That is not the language you use for discussion section. Your discussion section are generally written in such language. For example, 3/4 of the mothers in our sample were, so you convert that 80% to 3/4. Does that make sense? Or approximately quarter of our mothers, or nearly quarter of our sample were females, or nearly or say 50, or you can say half of our mothers were um, admitted that they were doing improper parenting feeding styles. Okay, things like that. So okay, so this is the kind of language you use for a discussion section. Now, very important is the way you discuss your findings in your discussion section, they should follow the same order which is there in your results. For example, in your results, if you are reporting and you are identifying, if you are stating your um, say your results regarding your section 2 first, the findings from your section 2 is what should be discussed in your discussion first, and then findings from your section 3 of your questionnaire. Does that make sense? It's very important to follow that consistency. So you, for example, in your tables, your table 1 is descriptive. So after your main findings, which is just your table, your first paragraph, which is just highlighting the very important rough key findings which you have. After that, the first thing which you will discuss is things from your table 1. For example, you may say that 80% of your population is, say, Indian, and majority of them are female, and Not Indian, which would be a good example for me to tell you? See, for example, in your table one, you may have things such as where you say that, yeah, 80% of a population was Caucasian in nature. And this is representative of wider studies, because generally in wider studies, it has been reported that Australian Caucasian population are more likely to participate in intervention-based studies rather than ethnic groups. So you may have a reference for it, and that's why you can discuss the findings. Okay, so your table one, which is descriptive in nature, where you are just reporting descriptive things, and I'll tell you what table one will have and things like that in your tutorials. But basically right now, just keep it in mind, your table one, which is descriptive in nature, you may want to discuss few key findings from that as part of your discussion. If you really don't have any key findings in your table one which are outstanding, then you don't really have much to discuss as part of your discussion section table one. Okay, so it's fine for you not to discuss your table one in your discussion section. So that is why discussing whether or not you should be having any discussion item pertaining to your table one depends upon what you have identified in your literature. Okay, so for example, you may find, yeah, see, now this is a good example which I have. You may find that you may report that say 80% of children who participated in your study were overweight and obese. Now you have collected information on children's BMI Z scores, meaning height and weight, and that's why you're reporting this in your table one. Okay, so that's why you may show that this is representative of the Australian sample, where say 1 in 4 children are overweight and obese. Okay, so if you have something comparative, that is the good time when you can discuss findings from table one in your discussion section. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Okay, so discussing table one in your discussion section is optional, depending upon how well have you identified articles which may be relevant for your table one discussion. Okay, but what compulsory you have to discuss in your discussion is findings from your table two, findings from your table two and table three, which are equivalent to your section 2 and section 3 of your questionnaire. All right, and I would strongly encourage maintain the same flow, which is discuss findings from your table 2, which is equivalent to section 2 first, then discuss findings from your table 3, which is equivalent to section 3 of your questionnaire after in your discussion section. Okay, so now look at this text box. It says that now start discussing your findings highlighted in the first paragraph one at a time. Now this is very important, guys. So now you have done your SPSS analysis. From your SPSS analysis, you may have three key findings. You may have, say, change in fruit and vegetable knowledge, pre and post questionnaire. You may have change in awareness regarding Australian Guides to Healthy Eating, pre and post questionnaire. And maybe you may have done some process evaluation where you may have some things like, say, participant satisfaction and stuff like that, more qualitative in nature. Okay, so now, as I said, the two key important findings which should be part of your discussion section is your SPSS findings, which is your change in knowledge, fruit and vegetable, and change in awareness regarding Australian Guides to Healthy Eating. Now you have to discuss these findings. Okay, so the first finding which I'll discuss is change in knowledge, fruit and vegetable consumption. All right, so now how do I go about this? Now over here, I take my first finding. Now see, guys, this example which I have given you in this Word document, that is from a research paper which I have written. So obviously it is not pertaining to one of your studies which you are doing as part of your this year's assignment. Okay, but basically the main thing which I'm telling you, you may say that our findings reported a change in knowledge. And see over here, this is where you use the discussion language. Say maybe your say because your section 2 is say more in a percentage form, that you just had 20% of participants answering the correct thing before intervention, and then say maybe 95% of people answered, gave you the correct answer after the intervention, post questionnaire. So you can actually calculate percentage points. Now I can really teach you as part of this unit how do you calculate percentage points. Okay, if you don't know, just Google up how do you calculate percentage points. So you can actually use discussion language over here where you can say that you saw a 10 percentage point increase in in knowledge and awareness regarding fruit and vegetable consumption uh, before and after intervention. Okay, um, I'm not say stating it in the best manner how it should be written, but you get the idea. So over here, this is where rather than saying that we had 20% people who answered correctly and then we had 80% who answered right, that language is a result language. People who are writing result section, they will be writing in terms of 20% gave me right answer and 80% give me right answer. You have to write in terms of discussion language. Over here, you can use, you have to, that is where you have to think. You can say, for example, that yes, there was a 10 percentage point increase on people who gave you correct answer before and after intervention. Okay, so over here I'm not doing 20/80, I'm doing a 10 percentage point increase. Or you can say there was a threefold increase, or you can say 1.5 times increase. Okay, so these are the kind of language which you use. Okay, but you just don't make up a language. Okay, you actually do the math and then you make up a number. All right, so you actually do that 20% minus 80%, and then whatever you have, your percentage point, that is the kind of, you actually do the math behind it. Okay, so you report that finding that there was a 10 percentage point increase before and after intervention. So now you have reported your finding from your table 2, which is your SPSS finding, which is equivalent to section 2 in your questionnaire. Now guys, this is how you do a discussion section. Now you have to find research articles which are similar to your study, meaning the kind of research articles which have done some sort of an intervention. They may or may not be on your target population, which is children. They may or may not be on Indian, highly unlikely. They could be on children, but on say Caucasian children. This is how you will start discussing. What you have to do is this: first you have to say discuss literature which reports findings similar to your study. Okay, so meaning you may say we found that knowledge improves after intervention. Maybe there are other researchers which have done similar sort of study in your area, which is nutrition education sort of studies, and even they have said that yes, there is a change in knowledge when it comes to delivering nutrition education session, and they have found the same improvement in fruit and vegetable consumption. Okay, but you may find that maybe what you have done is say a online session, but they have done a face-to-face session, and maybe you have done using Kahoot quizzes and they had done using flyers, posters, and some other kind of activities. These are the kind of discussion things which you have to bring out, guys. You may find 3 studies which have similar findings to yours, meaning that they also found an improvement in knowledge at the end of their intervention. But then you have to discuss, this is where your scholarship comes into the picture. You have to say, however, however, these findings should be carefully interpreted. Why? Because of the difference in the methodological designs between the intervention. Previous studies have generally used, say, face-to-face designs in delivering their intervention over a period of time, and then you can give a range 6 to 8 weeks. They have used hands-on resources in delivering their intervention, and then you give examples most commonly used, like say flyers and say posters and say actual recipe making. Whereas our study had done an online session using Kahoot quizzes in delivering the intervention. So this is how you say that although at the end point was similar, the way in which we have reached our end point versus the wider literature they have reached the end point, there are differences in that. Does that make sense? This is how you add scholarship to your discussion writing. All right, so there are differences in which in which other researchers have done the study from yours, although your endpoint is the same. Okay, Similarly, then you have to identify studies which are opposing to your findings, meaning there could be other studies in the literature which have seen that they have no change at the end of their intervention, or maybe, yes, there is no change between intervention and control group. And see, that could be one thing. Yours is an intervention only group. Maybe other studies which are there in the literature, they have had intervention and control group. So many such differences. So now after your similar findings, you have to discuss your contrasting findings. Okay, meaning those studies in the literature which have found findings contrary to yours. You will say, for example, 3 studies were similar to yours. Everybody had a change in knowledge and awareness at the end of it, which is great. Okay. Then you have to discuss contrary findings where you will say that, however, we found 5 studies where there was no change in knowledge at the end of the intervention. Now, again, over here comes your scholarship. Why do you think those 5 studies were not able to achieve a successful outcome at the end of their intervention? Sometimes articles, they honestly tell you why there was no change. Other times they don't tell you that, and it is up to you to figure out. Okay, so this is where again comes your scholarship. So you may say that maybe the study was done, say for example, on multiple ethnic background. However, the kind of intervention they delivered was very general Caucasian style, and therefore you speculate that their intervention may have been unsuccessful. So this is the way you try to identify why is it that they could not find successful results, whereas you could find successful results. Okay. And there are, so you have to pick up on couple of points. And if you see over here, I have written a lot of, I've given a very big example on me picking up the different pointing as to why I found some results and other studies could not. I have given you one example, which is, say, the intervention materials which they may have used could be very Caucasian specific, whereas they had a very multi-ethnic background in their intervention. And that's why maybe the ethnic people, they could not relate to those resources. For example, if you tell an Indian to say have, for example, what do you generally have? Say, for example, if you have, say, whole meal bread for your lunch and for your dinner, they won't really be able to identify with it, because Indians, they have chapatis or rotis or that flat Indian bread. Okay, so if you give a resource which increases their fiber intake, but using Caucasian foods, they won't be able to identify, and that definitely could lead to a failure of an intervention. So does that make sense, guys? So this is one of the areas which I can justify as to why they did not find successful findings, but I found successful findings because I tailored my intervention very carefully to the Indian ethnic background. Okay, so there could be many such reasons like that, which you have to identify once you carefully read the research articles which you have selected to discuss in your discussion section. And to help you with that, guys, please go through this example which I have written over here. Okay, this will give you more idea as to how you can, for instance, discuss your findings. Sometimes some students have found articles which are very similar to theirs, meaning once, as I said, you start off discussing similar findings, right? So you found something, the other researchers also found something, and their methodology is more or less similar, then you don't need to discuss that. It is good. Then you have to focus your main discussion on the contrasting finding, meaning you finding something, but other researchers not finding the same thing as yours. This is where then you discuss that findings. Okay, the contrasting findings. So this will require, guys, rather than me talking more about it, I would strongly recommend for all those who are writing a discussion section, please read this document of mine twice or thrice before you start writing your actual discussion. How I go about it is, if I were a student in your place, I would read this twice or thrice. Then I would select the articles which I want to use in my discussion section. And how I start, segregating articles is that I know that these researchers' findings, they are similar to mine. So these are the studies which I'm going to use to support that what I have found is similar to the literature. These articles have found something which is not similar to me. It is contrasting of me, meaning their nutrition education sessions did not do any good. And then I read the similar articles. I see their methodology, how it was different to mine, although we have similar findings. And I acknowledge that in my discussion. I read my contrasting articles. I try to figure out why is it that their intervention was not successful, because that is the information which I can use to defend my findings in my writing. So I can say their intervention was not successful because of XYZ reason. However, in my intervention, I have considered these things. That's why we have found successful result in this pilot intervention of ours. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, guys, these are some things which I have reported over here, which you should be very careful about, which is that when you're discussing findings, when you're quoting other people's study, you need to have details of these other people's study. And I have done this, I have done a commenting on this a lot in your ethics application. So that learning starts from that phase itself. Okay. So for instance, when you're quoting other people's study, you need to give the study details, meaning what is the sample size of that study? What is the age group of that study? The nationality. Then roughly what is their IV DV, meaning what have they, don't say that IV in their study was that and DV, no. But when you write a statement, I should be able to understand that this is what that study was trying to measure. So I can see whether you're comparing the same sort of variables or whether you're doing something completely wrong. Okay. So does that make sense, guys? So these are the kind of study details which should be highlighted when you're quoting other people's work. In this working example of mine, I have shown you how you can summarize other people's work. For example, over here, I have used cross-sectional studies. You see, I have actually used, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have summarized 5 cross-sectional studies in one sentence to justify that these 5 studies, they had similar findings to my study. Okay. So I have told you from which ethnic background these studies have been done. So this study is from Australia. This study was looking at food outlets, meaning fast food outlets. So they were examining 325 fast food outlets. Because these were fast food outlets, there was no information, meaning things such as participants' age and ethnicity, all of that is not related to it. It doesn't make sense. These studies were only about where is the study conducted, how many fast food outlets did they measure. Okay, so that is why I have done things over here. And then I said that they reported on low income neighborhoods and rural areas and stuff like that. And see, I have even told you how was their key IV and DV measured as direct food availability using in-store survey. All right, which is in line with our observations, meaning I had used the same methodology as other researchers are using the methodology, which strengthens my finding more. Does that make sense, guys? Okay, so this is how you have to justify your finding. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, it's becoming really dark, right? But I hope this is better now. Yeah, I think, yeah, this is better, right? Okay, guys, does that make sense? Okay, so that is one of the things which I saw in your ethics application, is that you were missing out the finer details of reporting in the study, but this is how you report finer details in the study. Okay. Sports finding, yep. I covered all of that. Yes, so this is where scholarly critique is very important. And then summary statement. So at the end, for example, as I said, basically, guys, this summary statement over here, what I mean is that you have a lot more justification or defending to do with studies that are contrasting to your findings. Okay, this is where you have a lot of justification to do. And that is why at the end, what I have done in this paragraph is I have summarized, because of XYZ reasons, which I have discussed in detail above, because of XYZ reasons, my findings are different from the other researchers' findings. Okay, so at the end, I have just tried to summarize it. But guys, I hope this makes a lot of clarity. I'll quickly give you a recap again. Your first paragraph of your discussion is a very short and simple, sweet paragraph, which is highlighting your key findings, which you have identified from your SPSS analysis. Okay. Then you discuss your findings, which are there in your table 2. All right. In your table 2, this is the findings which you discuss, which is, as I said, that you first, how do you start your discussion? You find articles which are similar to the other articles. Just a minute. Mummy, light on, Karan. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just wanted the light to be on. Okay. So you discuss articles which are similar to your articles. Okay. Over here, you give study details, as I have done. Very important. If there are methodological points which are similar between you and the other researcher, that is a very good thing. Highlight those similar methodological points. If there are methodological points which are different between the way you have conducted your study and others have conducted your study, however, both of you have arrived to the same conclusion, meaning post-intervention, there is a change in knowledge and awareness, which also is a good thing, that is fine, but you still highlight that, okay? That you need to be mindful that this methodology is working, whereas even our methodology is also working to come to the same conclusion. Then you discuss contrasting findings, meaning findings which they have conducted nutrition education sessions, but their findings did not find anything significant, whereas you found significant at the end of your intervention. Okay, so again, you summarize the key things from those papers. As I said, over here, I have given you an example where I have used individual cross-sectional studies, and I have summarized this in one crisp statement. If you see over here, I have used a systematic review in showing that how one systematic review, which was focusing on studies in the United States on rural location and income locations and having so many measured food outlets, this is the findings which they have reported, which are contrasting from my findings, which have been done in the Australian context. So over here, I'm teaching you how you use a systematic review in summarizing a systematic review for comparing or for contrasting with your findings. All right. So there is a skill, there is a key in summarizing previous literature, previous study designs in developing your writing. So that's why I've given you both the examples over here. How do you summarize previous original article studies, such as cross-sectional articles and things like this, and you use for your discussion? How do you summarize previous systematic reviews or meta-analysis, and then you use that in your discussion to defend your findings? Okay. Again, the thumb rule golden point over here is you may not have a lot of justification to do for your similarities because they are similarities. People have found the same result like yours. Kudos to you. Good for you. But when you have contrasting studies, over there, you definitely need to show your scholarship. You need to defend your findings as to why they have not been successful in their intervention, but you have been successful in your intervention. Okay. For that, guys, this entire paragraph which I have, it teaches you how do you defend your study in contrast to the other studies which have not shown successful findings. This paragraph over here teaches you how do you summarize other cross-sectional studies, meta-analysis done by other researchers, and then how do you compare it to yours? Okay, so this is how do you learn to summarize previous meta-analysis, cross-sectional studies. This paragraph teaches you how do you critique your study, how do you defend your study in contrast to those those studies which were not finding the same result as yours. Okay. And this paragraph teaches you how do you summarize individual original articles such as cross-sectional studies, etc. In comparing your findings. Okay, but once you have the skills, you can use cross-sectional studies for contrasting your findings. You can use systematic reviews in comparing findings which are similar to yours. As long as you have the skills, you can use everything interchangeably. There are a lot of permutation combinations in scientific writing. You will only learn when you start practicing it. There's only so much, guys, which I can actually deliver in form of, say, teaching you how to write a discussion. At the end, it all falls down to you reading, you following the steps which I have given you, and then you implementing it in your practice writing. Okay, and that's why probably if you don't do your dissemination seminar, you as a group have 2 weeks, 2 golden weeks in actually writing up your 40%. Okay, and doing a good job in practice writing. Okay, so now, guys, I haven't given process evaluation findings over here, but you can have one more paragraph over here, which could be based upon your process evaluation, which are more about your qualitative findings, where you can say that, 1 minute, huh? Mummy, આ બંધ રાખો ને, બહુ પેલું shade આવે છે. Sorry about that. What was I saying? Yes, so for your process evaluation, things, as I said, are very simple. Most of, obviously, your classmates are amazing and they will say that, yes, they understood the content and your presentation style was amazing. And you can have those quotes, say, as you know, as your findings, as that third paragraph of yours. You can have those quotes. You can see how it's written in qualitative papers. So as I said, you are just, say, not even actually skimming the iceberg for qualitative analysis or qualitative sort of paper writing, but it's good to include that if you're measuring that. Okay, so I'll just leave that up to you. That is your homework, to go and search how do you include quotes in that discussion section of yours. All right, and maybe have some discussion around it. But to be honest with you guys, if I was working as a student in the team, those quotes are actually sort of results. So I would actually have that in my results section, and I would save my discussion words. If I was a good discussion writer, I would use majority of my words to justify my findings, which I have from my table 2 and table 3, which is my section 2 and section 3 of my questionnaire, which is what I have used with SPSS analysis. Okay, that the process evaluation which you have done, that 20% people, not 20, actually 90% people found that your content was amazing and you were an amazing speaker and they understood everything and all of that. That is actually sort of a result, and it is best to include it in the results section. So the stand which you should be taking, all those people who are writing discussion section, if you don't include this in your discussion, I'm totally cool with it. Okay, if you don't have some qualitative things to discuss about, because you, as a new beginner of a discussion, for you to write a discussion well, learn one thing and learn it well. And right now for you, that one thing is learn how to discuss your quantitative findings. Once you have done this at a fair bit amount, then you can, you know, like in your future employment opportunities, you can learn how to do qualitative research and discuss qualitative research. Okay, right now, if I were writing the discussion, I would take the stand that I'm not focusing on these qualitative process evaluation findings, which is just about people liking my intervention and all of that. I will use my discussion word limit only to focus on my quantitative findings, which are findings from SPSS. Does that make sense? And I support you in that decision if you take that decision. All right. So that is how you discuss your findings. Then the people who are writing discussion, you write about limitations. Okay, strengths and then limitations. So what are the strengths of your study? Okay, so for example, I have highlighted a few words over here, guys, is to show you these were the strengths in my study. Okay, guys, you now have a pretty rough, actually a pretty good idea, not rough idea. That's the opposite. You have a pretty good idea as to what should entail as part of your strengths and limitations section. Because if you look at your assignment one, part one, and you know how you have critiqued a lot of limitations which are there in other people's work, this will help you to write your strength and your limitation section. Okay, so the kind of things which I've highlighted in this example were the strengths of my study. Okay, so it depends what were the strengths of your study. Okay, so for example, I've said the strength in my study was, say, the sample size, and what else was there? Yeah, the way I had measured food availability, because we had done in-store surveys, and then I had developed a scoring pattern out of it. The strength in your study could be that maybe you have used previously validated questionnaires, although they have been modified, but still they have a scientific backing to it. You can say the strength of your study would be previously validated questionnaires. You have done pre-post intervention design, quasi-experimental design, rather than doing a post-intervention design only. Now, I won't give you all the answers, okay? But you get an idea, right? So these are the strength of your study. Okay, then similarly, guys, you come to the limitation section of your study. Now, guys, to write a good limitation section is where you don't just acknowledge that, yes, you had a limitation, but you try to justify and you try to defend your limitation. Okay, see, guys, a good discussion section is all about defending. You know how the entire big thing which I did at the top was to teach you how do you defend your findings from studies which are contrasting your own, right? Similarly, in the limitation section, you may say, for example, that your study was, for instance, on a very small sample size. Yes, your study was on a small sample size, but because it was the nature of a pilot study, yes, your study was with self-reported questionnaire, but that was done. So you get an adequate sample size for your pilot study. Then you can say things such as, what else are your limitations? You will have a lot of limitations. Yes, it was cross-sectional in design, but again, because it was cross-sectional, but to strengthen your findings, you have done a pre-post intervention questionnaire. All right. So although it was cross-sectional, you have something to compare to. Okay. So guys, similarly, for example, if you look at this, maybe you have males, females, both in your study, and you acknowledge that you haven't done analysis for males and females separately. Firstly, because if you don't know SPSS and statistics, right now, I don't have the capacity to teach you all of that. All right. But for example, if you look at my running example over here, I have acknowledged that yes, I haven't done a within category analysis for the type of takeaway outlets in my example. Similarly, you may say that you have done analysis on overall sample, which included males and females. You haven't done a within category gender analysis, meaning males versus females and stuff like that. And then you have to defend that why haven't you done it? Because you did not have enough sample size to do this in the first place. Okay, so I have defended my findings. And not just that, I have gone further in highlighting that in my sample, I have highlighted that, yes, the full service takeaways, they provide more healthier options than, say, other type of takeaways. Similarly, you can acknowledge and you can say that, yes, previous literature has shown that females, for example, or females, which is like mothers, they are more likely to practice, say, authoritative or the bad kind of parenting styles, whereas fathers are more likely to practice the laissez-faire, or, like, means the more relaxed kind of parenting style. However, you could not do a between group analysis segregated on gender in your study because of limited sample size. So see, you're acknowledging thing in the previous literature that, yes, this is an important point. This has been done in the previous literature, but you couldn't do it because of limited sample size. Does that make sense? if you try to justify your limitations like this, then your limitations become viable, meaning people then appreciate your limitations. They understand, okay, it's not because she was lazy, that's why didn't she do it, but she knows the importance of doing something like this based on previous evidence. She has references for it, but however, it was not in the scope of a study, which is totally fine. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is how you justify your limitations. And then lastly, guys, you have your conclusion section. And in your conclusion section, the first sentence of your conclusion is very, very crisp, which is the main findings of your conclusion section. All right, which is what is the key thing which you found out of your paper. All right, which is the change in knowledge and awareness, all of that. That is the key thing which you have found out of your paper. All right. And guys, before I forget, if you see the kind of studies that you will be using in your discussion section, are a lot of them will be based upon other people, other researchers who have done some sort of, say, intervention sessions. They may be, say, nutrition education based, or they could be, say, intervention sessions which are combining nutrition, physical activity, and mental health and stuff like that. And you are just using the nutrition findings from those articles in, say, justifying your findings. But basically, because your paper or your study is, say, delivering a nutrition education session, that's why a lot of articles that you will be using for comparing and contrasting your findings will be based upon nutrition education session. Okay, so now guys, coming back to this point, so yes, in the conclusion, the first statement will be very, very crisp, which is highlighting the key thing which you found. Then guys, you will write, say, the take home message out of it. You know how in the ethics application you had this thing about future implications, that for example, that why is this important? This is important because future research may benefit from XYZ at a community level, at a clinical level, at a policy building level. That is what will come over here. Another thing which will come over here is future recommendation. Okay, so there are three components to it. One is, in a crisp way, you write down your main finding, then you connect that main finding to the direct implication your study has, which could be at a community level or a clinical level or at a policy level. Okay, so that is the two subsets. Now the third subset is about future recommendation. How can your study be taken further by future researchers? You have done this pilot thing on so-and-so population at a so-and-so locality at a so-and-so level. What is the future thing that other researchers can do, and why should they be doing this? If they escalate your study to this level, meaning, for example, if you are just doing it in Canberra in one school, if they do it in other schools, why is it important? All right. Will this change some policies? Will this change some health outcomes? Or do you recommend, say, a follow-up period which is not just based upon impact evaluation, which is immediate, but maybe a 6 weeks follow-up period, because then you can actually see a change in BMI, or say a change in their dietary intake and dietary patterns, which can, so for those kind of things is what you have to say, that these are the type of future recommendations you have and for what reasons. Okay, so you can see a change in pattern in, say, anthropometry, biochemistry, dietary, so and so. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is the key things which are involved at the end of it, which is conclusion, in your conclusion section, and that is where you end. So you see guys, like why I have in your rubrics, the person who is writing discussion is only writing discussion, because there are so many components to a discussion, like discussing the body of your discussion, which is like, you know, discussing your main findings, section 2 and section 3 of your questionnaire. It is a very, very novel thing to learn. Then this identifying the strengths and limitation. Again, as you see, it is not straightforward. You have to use justification techniques in that. And lastly, the conclusion, which is again not straightforward. Why? Because you need your conclusion in light with impact which your own research directly has, versus future implications. Okay, so there are many components to writing a good discussion section. And it is not that previously students have not written a good discussion section. Last year, I had several students who had scored HD, who had written a discussion section. Not all of them, but there were like at least a handful from a class of, we had a class of 30. So I don't remember the exact number, but yes, there were a couple of students who had scored HDs and Ds in their discussion section. So it is not impossible to do it, but basically, if you are very new at writing, doing scientific writing, follow my guidance to the T. Okay, follow my guidance to the T at the moment, and then the more confident you become, you will develop your own writing style. But right now, if you're very new at it, learn from the examples which I've given you. So guys, literally I have given you a working example of a discussion section, but I have dissected it for you. Discussion section are there in a lot of papers, nothing new, but how many have actually dissected it for you in such a way to teach you how do you write this? Again, which I'm telling you guys, this level of say feedback and guidance is not provided at a postgraduate level, and there is only so much that I can do. All right, so in your interface feedback, a couple of you said that you didn't teach us how to do XYZ. I'm sorry guys, this is what is teaching, this is what I can do, and this is what I can possibly give you. If I do any more than this, it would be like me writing your discussion section, which is like zero learning at your end, right? So this is the maximum I can dissect things for you. And now it's up to you to take it forward from here. And of course, even after this, I have these consultation sessions with you and everything. So you are well placed, guys. Trust me, you won't get this much of support in your semester 2. And you will get like minimal to almost no support when you are in your placement, when it comes to writing stuff and things like that. So you will be pretty much on your own. So right now you're getting it, value it, and make the most of it. Okay, guys. So now coming back to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so I believe I'm sharing the PowerPoint with you now, right? Okay, so discussion. All right, so these are the key things which I have gone over in that document. And guys, on your what do you say, on your Canvas under module, but my supervisor had given me this this Word document where she had summarized all of these kind of guidelines on how to write a manuscript. I'm just sharing it with you in case if it helps you to write a good manuscript, meaning a good introduction, good method, result, discussion, all of that. Okay, so that is just additional FYI resource. Guys, I just wanted to let you know that just like, you know, how you have a couple of students this year as your mentors who were actually Masters of Nutrition and Dietetics first semester student last year. So similarly, guys, if you're interested in becoming mentors as part of the Need Assessment Mentoring Program next year, which is how you have a couple of students right now who are your mentors. So once you are in your senior year, which is, you know, next year, when you are in your senior year and you are in your placements, if you are interested in becoming a need assessment mentor, please approach me in December, because that is where I start allocating topics and I start thinking about such stuff. So if you are interested in becoming a mentor, let me know. And I'll definitely try to, like, you know, take you in and on board. All right, guys, I'm signing off now. Let me do this properly. Let me do this well. So I'll pause record.